The top 10 richest people in all of history. Number 1, Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa lived in the year 1280. He lived in the country Mali, and people describe him as the richest person to ever live in history. He was the king of Timbuktu and was referred to as the West African largest producer of gold in the world. Just how rich was Musa? There really is no accurate way to describe his wealth. Records are scarce or non-existent. However, they describe him as having an army of 200,000 men that carried gold plates and gold cups and gold crowns. Personally, I would rather live now. Back then, you died very quickly from disease. This man only lived 40 years. He couldn't really spend that money on anything that we can spend it on. And the whole thing is a big pile of BS. It's the internet, overinflating this guy. Number 2, John D. Rockefeller Sr. This man was actually fairly recently alive. He was born 1839 and died 1937, which was within the last century. Most people consider him one of the, if not the wealthiest person to legitimately make money in history when you adjust for inflation. He had a net worth of around $336 billion, inflation adjusted. Now, how did he make his money? He co-founded Standard Oil Company, which dominated as a monopoly on the oil industry. Rockefeller decided to dedicate the second half of his life to philanthropic and charitable causes. He truly was a business tyrant and business leader. Number 3, Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie, most people consider him the third or second richest person to ever exist when you adjust for inflation. Now, what did Andrew Carnegie do? He was a steel tycoon who oftentimes butted heads with John D. Rockefeller. This man started the U.S. Steel Corporation and eventually sold it to J.P. Morgan for $480 million. If you adjust for inflation, that comes about to be around $400 billion. Number 4, Bill Gates. Most people consider Bill Gates as the richest person to exist ever. In fact, as of current times, he is considered someone who is always at the top of the list, despite him giving improbable, flabbergasting amounts to charity. Bill Gates, after founding Microsoft, which is a tech company, went on to devote the second half of his life to philanthropic and charitable causes. He has pledged to donate 99% of his wealth to charitable organizations. Number 5, Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is considered one of the geniuses of business. He is constantly butting heads with Bill Gates, currently as one of the richest people to exist that's still alive. The interesting about him and Bill is that Buffett has already donated an extreme amount of money to charity, over $20 billion, and he continues giving every year, hoping to deplete all of his resources by the time he dies. Buffett is worth an estimated $80 to $90 billion and growing, and despite his considerable donations to charity, he has reclaimed his throne as the number 2 richest person in the world. He did dip to number 10 after his charitable giving, yet for some reason he has risen back to the top thanks to the power of the businesses he still owns. Number 6, Sam Walton. Sam Walton is the creator of Walmart. He grew that one tiny store to a global organization. Walmart, as a company, has created more wealth than almost any company to ever exist. Some say that Sam Walton is truly the richest and most successful billionaire to ever exist because he created so much wealth that his children are still, even to this day, ranked as some of the top 10 to top 20 richest people in the world, even though he only gave a small percent ownership of his company to each of his children. He has 4 children, and if you were to add up all of the net worth of each of his children, including him, and adjust for inflation, many people would peg it as over $600 billion total. Number 7, the Rothschilds family. The Rothschilds family has a net worth of $350 billion. Now that is combined net worth if all the family members came together. Because of that, technically it doesn't really count. The next one would be Nikolay Romanov. This man is a Russian, and people peg him at a net worth of $300 billion inflation adjusted. This man lived a long time ago, and who knows if he's still around? Probably not. Number 9. Number 9 is Osman Ali Khan. Osman Ali Khan is considered the richest person in the world, but most accounts of this are from people of the internet who really don't know what they're talking about. However, they report that he had an estimated wealth of $2 to $100 billion, quite the range. He used an 185 carat diamond as a paperweight and reportedly had a collection of over 50 Rolls Royce. Quite frankly, I don't buy it. Finally, the last person on the list is, of course, Henry Ford. Henry Ford is the man behind the Ford company. Now, most people don't know this, but when Henry started his company, there were hundreds upon hundreds of motor companies that he was competing against. He was one of the few to survive and thrive, and not only did he thrive, but he has allowed Ford to still be a strong motor competitor even to this day after he has died. Henry Ford lived a very interesting life, and what's most interesting about him is probably the fact that he invented the Model T, which was a revolutionary car. He invented some very efficient ways of manufacturing these cars, including the assembly line process, as well as creating the optimal productivity for workers. He was the first person to pioneer the 40-hour work week. He discovered through a lot of testing and experimentation that if you let workers rest rather than work them to death, the optimal amount of time to get the most results was 40 hours. Finally, Henry Ford was incredibly unique in the sense that this man was a go-getter. He did not have the world handed to him, and he actually was completely self-made. When he was just starting out, he was nothing more than a factory worker in the Thomas Edison Company factory. Thomas Edison was also a very pioneering scientist, successful man, persevering individual, and businessman. And Henry Ford at the time was nothing more than a factory worker. It's incredible to see how far someone can go in a lifetime. And Ford was one of those individuals who was alive not that long ago. In the last century, he was born, raised, and died. Am I missing any successful people? Who do you admire most from this list? Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next video.